Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sunday Night Sit Down. We're here with Lindsay Powell today, another edition where we're going to sit down and talk to her about how she's running for office. You guys know that the Sunday Night Sit Down is where we have one-on-one conversations, right? With people who are running for elective office in the state of Pennsylvania and abroad. So on Tuesday the 19th, PA voters are going to be voting for who will decide to represent them in the House of Representatives. This is a special election being held because the former state representative, Sarah Inamorado, she decided to run for county executive. So we reached out to both nominated candidates, so they could have a chance to sit down with us, having this exclusive interview, but we did not receive a reply back from the Republican candidate. So here joining us to talk about her campaign is Lindsay Powell to be the next state representative, District 21. And she won the Democratic nomination by making history as the first Black person to be nominated and endorsed by that district. So this is pretty exciting news. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, John.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's kick it off. Let's kick it off here. What actually motivated you to get into politics?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, first and foremost, for your time and One Hood for making the space. It's been really exciting to be on this side. I've had the opportunity to work with you all in several different spaces. And so it's really exciting to actually get to sit down on the Sunday Sit Down. Why did I get into politics? I've always been someone who's been very interested in politics. So I didn't have the fortune of growing up in Pittsburgh. I actually grew up in New York City in Shirley Chisholm's old congressional district. And growing up, her name was everywhere. The streets named after her, parks named after her, buildings named after her. And I joke that I grew up in her shadow, but she was truly everywhere as one of the first Black congresswoman, one of the first congresswomen to explicitly lift up Black folks, Caribbean folks, Latinos, those that made up her district. And I've always been such an amazing, and I've always been such an admirer of her amazing work. And as I grew up seeing the impact that legislators, that politicians can have on communities. I wanted to work for those people. I wanted to make those changes. And so I've had the fortune of working in politics for the past 10 years or so for representatives across the federal and local level, from Senator Schumer to Hakeem Jeffries on Capitol Hill, and in the joy of my life working for the city of Pittsburgh for almost half a decade. And so I've always been in the background. I joke and truly I've done every job but this one. And when I was looking around the room and looking around the district, and we were, as Sarah was running for Allegheny County executive, we were all kind of, collectively as a community, what do we want to see next? We want someone who's passionate about this work, someone who has a lived experience to speak to some of the injustices that we see in our systems. And I felt moved to run for the seat because of that opportunity, because of my professional background, my lived experience, and just frankly, because we need more politicians that will push for our region. We deserve better. Our neighbors deserve better. Our communities deserve better. We deserve a kinder, more equitable government. And that's what I want to fight for in Harrisburg.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing to hear. I'm sure with all of your experience, you'll do a great job, if elected to office. But I couldn't help but overhear how you had so much experience in the background, right? And that you know how it is when you're working in civil service in the background, like everybody knows the mayor, everybody knows the county executives, everybody knows all those people. But there's so many people that work in civil service in the background. So now it's like, now that you're stepping to the forefront, have you been surprised by the reaction to your campaign?
Yes, but also no. I mean, yes, because again, as someone who's been in the background, it's even the other day we were at an event and they're like, "Oh, get in the middle," and I was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Oh, right." But like that part has been a little bit interesting in a transition. But the part that's no for me is that like if the message is making sure that we have a more progressive, more equitable society, making sure that we affirm what we know are the biggest and most critical issues of our times. Making sure that we have someone who actually sits in community, someone who believes in the power of our neighbors to fight for what we know we deserve. If that's the message, it resonates. And we've seen it over and over and over again, especially in this progressive movement that we have on Allegheny County and the western side of the state. We've seen it as we've elected Summer Lee and Sarah Murato, and that message resonates because people want better, people want more. And so it's definitely been, for me, a bit of a transition. And exciting and surprising in the most wonderful ways that people want to help, want to be a part of what we're building, but also know that we've built this foundation that centers our most vulnerable people, our most left behind folks, and building on that work is what our people want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up Representative Summer Lee, Congresswoman. There's quite a few, Representative Mays, there's been a big change in how voters are choosing more progressive action, right? More progressive minded people, to get in here and try to make a change. So I think that's really exciting, which is really cool because that's a great segue to really my next question for you, which is about political philosophy, right? And decision making. It's like, well, what is your political philosophy, your approach, right? And, to being hopefully elected and then thinking in your mind future, you're holding office, how would you actually make decisions from that position?
I mean, I think that's such an important question. What's your orientation? What brings you to this work? And I always lean back on, and I mentioned a few times, the communities that I come from. I'm a Black Latino woman from a working class background. And I think about those communities. I think about my communities as I'm thinking about legislation and policy. At the city, I led the legislation and policy shop on behalf of the city within the Office of Equity, which was one of the first of its kind across the nation. And when we talk about equity, I think sometimes folks get the idea that equity is, who you hire and representation, and that is a piece of it. But more impactful is, what does the legislation and policy mean? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? And thinking about your policy making from that perspective of from the very beginning of who's in the room when you're doing the research, who is in the room guiding policy to practice. How are you implementing it? Who is it helping? Who is it harming? Having that orientation as I think about policy and legislation has always been, kind of my bent and my background. And pushing for more of that at the city level, more at the state level, is what what I want to fight for in Harrisburg for the 21st and for the Commonwealth as well.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's totally amazing. Thank you for that wonderful answer. That was fantastic. And so, let me ask you a follow-up question. What about your approach to decision making when it comes to building coalitions? Because you mentioned equity, you mentioned decision making along the lines of equity and diversity. What about your decision making concerning building coalitions?
Yeah, I think the best legislators and more important, the best legislation comes from community. And so when it comes to building coalition, it's not just, hey, I have this thing that we need done, so let's all get together and coalesce around it and we can hold hands until we get across the finish line. It's a constant it's having a constant presence in these spaces. Building coalition is being there for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Building coalition means that you're building not just partnerships, but you're building friendships. The thing that I love deeply about this work, and even outside of this run, has been that when you're building a coalition, when you're building a more equitable community, you're there, you're in it, you're working with each other, you're hand in hand, you're shoulder to shoulder, whether it's the big fights, the little fights. I think more than ever, folks are seeing that we need coalitions. At the height of the pandemic, when you had truly community members, organizations, legislators, all hands on board, all hands on deck, you saw that community means not just showing up for on the city county building for this, or it's, just showing up for this ribbon cutting. It's, making sure that we're there for the little things as well, making sure that folks know that they can count on their community members, they can count on their legislators, they can count on their elected officials to show up outside of just, the ribbon cutting, the taking the picture and all of that. And so it's something that, good legislation doesn't happen without deep, meaningful coalitions. And I've been very grateful to be a part of the community here in the 21st District as a URA board member, Urban Redevelopment Authority board member, as a board member of Lawrenceville United. I've been in these coalitions, I've been in these communities, and you can't get, as I've said, good legislation done without starting from that space first.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you would say there's a degree of integrity that comes with that. I mean, approaching the building of coalitions and such.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people know when you're coming to them, with ulterior motives, right? People know that when you're showing up, and you just happen to be there when the pictures need taken, you just happen to be there, like community knows when you're a fraud, and they'll sniff you out real quick. And so
That's so true.
they'll sniff you out and they'll out you real quick. And so I think it's important that we have more legislators that recognize that and that truly want to be in communities, truly want to build these coalitions and not be fraudulent about it.
You know what? That's a really good point because, like, at home here in America, right, we have a lot of issues going around with fraud right now, right? Voter fraud, a lot of things going on in the political scene that aren't exactly good. And so, as we watch the news, and a lot of people are worried about things like election integrity and engagement and all those different things. So, how would you engage folks along those lines? How would you get the conversation going and maybe even ease people's concerns, with all the issues surrounding the last election?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we need to stop giving a platform to people that are election deniers. Unfortunately, my opponent in this race has been noted to be a QAnon supporter, and at the January 6th, as she calls it, speeches, it's we need to stop giving a platform to these people. Full stop. It's uh, frankly dangerous that folks who are spewing these ideas that our democracy has been undermined. And I don't even want to get into some of the things that I've seen, other folks say, but like our democracy is being undermined by all these like sordid and underhanded dealings and initiatives. Like that's not true. And continuing to give these people a platform, whether it's here locally running as a Republican in the 21st District, or if it's nationally in some of these news organizations that continue to spout downright lies to kids, downright lies to the public, has to be stopped. In order to make sure that we have free and fair elections, we need to continue to fight for our democracy. I think even in the adverse, we don't have a strong democracy if we're not ensuring that people are able to continue to vote in the most accessible ways. So like we've stood up mail-in ballots, making sure that people's polling places are accessible, making sure that we have protections for poll workers as well. We're seeing nationally that as politics have gotten more divisive and more ugly and more dangerous, frankly, folks who are volunteers like poll watchers are getting targeted. Folks who are just volunteering, on election day, to collect an extra, couple bucks, but also to make sure that we have free and fair elections, those folks are being violently targeted. And so it's not just getting rid of the folks that are spewing lies to our community members and nationally. It's also making sure that we are doubling down to make sure that we do have free and fair elections and we're not taking it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think what you're bringing up is that, a lot of this fraud and stuff does lead to concerns about national safety, all right? Safety across the country and safety in different cities, right? And so, like, when it comes to your approach to public safety, what do you see in the future, or what are you wanting to see in the future?
Yeah. So one of the projects that I worked on while I was at the city that I'm deeply proud of is the Office of Community Health and Safety. And I think for far too long, we've had a policing policing response to what is a mental health, what is a public health, what are other just ways that we can double down as a community to protect ourselves. And so the Office of Community Health and Safety, OCHS for short, is alternative policing, is non-policing responders that'll come to a call, say when 911's called, and it's clearly an issue where with support, with community resources, with someone to help kind of triage the needs that that person has, that person doesn't need to end up in the criminal justice system at all. We have the community resource that we need to expand, but we have the resources that we need to wrap around that people so that they are not entering our criminal justice system. My background as well has been in criminal justice reform at the federal level. And we know from the top to the middle to the bottom, our criminal justice system is deeply, deeply flawed. Or even, it was potentially designed this way to be deeply flawed. But we have more than ever coalitions, going back to the very beginning, coalitions of people that know that we can do and be better for community members. And so when it comes to public safety, I've been very adamant that we need a more holistic public health approach. We need to be diverting more funds to make sure that we have social workers that are able to come out on calls. And we're not just seeing that in the city of Pittsburgh. Millvale has started a program there. There are other municipalities, particularly in our district, that are excited to bring other public health professionals to the public safety space because we know it works. You can't arrest someone for shoplifting food and expect to get a positive response from a criminal justice response. It doesn't make sense. And if you even talk to folks in the public safety side, as I've had for years trying to build this Office of Community Health and Safety, they're throwing their hands up too, where they're rearresting or responding to calls that they have no tools for. One of the conversations that has always stuck with me, I had a conversation with an officer where he was constantly, maybe once a week, responding to an aging issue. Clearly, this woman was experiencing, dementia or some type of, Alzheimer's that was causing her to leave her home, to wander and sometimes get violent. People will call 911, arresting and locking up an 81-year-old woman isn't going to do anything to solve the mental health issues that she's having or the public health issues that she's having. And consistently, that was his only tool. And so you see officers even throwing up their hands like, we can't arrest our way out of these issues. We also know that our criminal justice system is meant to be punitive and not restorative. And so when people think that they're, even in that case that I was talking about, when people think they're doing a service to call 911 to help, this older woman, there's nothing that the criminal justice system is going to offer her, but make it harder for her to get out of this vicious cycle. And so public safety, we need to really envelop in a public health approach to make sure that we're meeting people's needs, because more often than not, people are suffering from unmet needs, that need resources, that need care, and we need to have a direct pipeline so that we are, giving people the public health assistance that folks need rather than the punitive public safety approach.
Yeah, and that is absolutely a huge issue that needs to be addressed. And a lot of the things you're saying, bringing up, with your background in criminal justice, you kind of have a bird's eye view of what's going on over there, in law enforcement and the people and the need for social work and mental health. But would you also say that even doctors and hospitals, especially in the Pittsburgh region, with the high mortality rate for mothers, right, especially Black mothers in our region, like, is that an actual public crisis, right? And then it's like, if you're elected to office, how do you see yourself advocating on those issues as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because that's a huge piece of like our criminal justice, public health, public safety approach that often gets missed. We have a broken healthcare system. And so again, sending people to spaces that are going to be inhospitable to them. In the instance where, say, that woman that we talked about, does get diverted to the hospital. Who knows if she has insurance? Who knows if she has the ability to pay for the care that she needs? What if she needs long-term care? Who's going to pay for that if she doesn't have a family or folks that are able, or a pension, or retirement funds that are able to help assist her? And so we have a deeply broken healthcare system as well. You'd mentioned the report on Black mortality rates and Black infant mortality, and it's terrifying. To live in a city as a Black woman, who wants to maybe have a family one day, and think about Pittsburgh being one of the most dangerous spaces to be a Black mother, it is terrifying. And I know representatives like Representative Mays and others have really fought to really examine the maternal health crisis that we have, particularly the Black maternal health crisis that we have in the city. A lot of those factors, too, come from the disparities that we know exist in our cities between our Black and white neighbors. When you're talking about educational outcomes, health outcomes, consistently Black folks and Black women are at the very bottom. And so if we're not thinking intersectionally about our issues, public health, public safety, and our physical health, we're only getting a wee bit of the problem solved.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love how you're bringing up the fact that if we start focusing on, if there's more focus on helping Black mothers, afford health care, things like that, and actually solving this problem, that can even have broader reach across different nationalities, across different demographics, because it's like if there's more concentration in this area, there's a lot of Black women that live in Pittsburgh, is what I'm trying to say. And so it's like if you handle that demographic that has a lot of reach, then they're out. Black women are actually statistically starting businesses and different things like that, right? Moving the economy along. So it's like, how can they be such an important demographic to a region and be so overlooked in such an important area as their maternal health? You see what I mean? And then with the decline of the population in Pittsburgh, you think that there would be a focus on maternal health and those type of options in order to even encourage people to start families and different things so that the city doesn't have a decline of people. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And we're even seeing at like the larger scale how our medical system doesn't, have the right practices, have the right resources, particularly that, mothers and birthing people would need. Like you talk about the rise and accessibility of doulas and midwives. Again, not a mother yet, not a parent yet, but I have a lot of folks in my community that are, and particularly for Black women, having someone at their side that can challenge doctors, that can challenge hospital systems, that will fight for what they need when their doctor is telling them no, or insurance won't pay for this. When you have a resource on your hand that'll tell you, no, 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 you need this, and not just for you, but for your baby, to have someone who can be a champion by your side. And we're seeing that these hospital systems, these medical systems, you got to fight them, you got to push back, and it's consistently, we're seeing, while these, midwives and doulas, like we were talking about, have become more popular, they're still very inaccessible for Black women and Black mothers and Black birthing people. So you would think it makes a lot of sense, but I know we still have a lot of work to do. I couldn't
Yeah,
agree.
there's a lot of work to do on that particular issue alone. I mean, there's work overall in a lot of spaces, but that one is really important. And I asked you that follow up because I just felt like you just had more to offer on that question. So I appreciate you, rolling with me on that one. But
Thank you.
you did mention in there that there are economic disparities, right? Not just for Black women, but for Black men, for Black and brown people across the region, right? And then we're not even talking Pittsburgh, we're talking the state, even the nation, right? And so what do you see as future possibilities as growing economic, opportunities in District 21? What do you see?
This is something that I've been really proud of as a URA board member, that we've been working to make it easier, and working to create more opportunities for wealth building, for business building, particularly for Black Pittsburghers. One of the initiatives that we've rolled out and that I've worked heavily on at the city is Avenues of Hope. The idea is that we have all these beautiful thoroughfares, these main streets in largely predominantly Black neighborhoods that have gone underdeveloped. And rather than trying to push development for development's sake, how can we be more intentional in making sure that those businesses are going to not just community members, but Black community members that will really bring, build the block back and have the community history of being in these spaces, but never the opportunity of being the owner of these spaces. And we know the power of ownership. And so the Avenues of Hope initiative started 2020, and it's been ongoing and growing under the leadership of the URA and Mayor Gainey to make sure that we're really centering and being explicit about Black businesses and Black folks. For so long, government has been very cautious, very careful not to say Black. We'll say underserved. We'll say, struggling populations, XYZ, but being intentional and saying this is an initiative to make sure that Black business owners are able to not just open up shop, but are able to thrive is important. And so the initiative right now, there are 7 different avenues all across the city where the URA owns the property. We're able to white box it, meaning like we're able to get it ready, all that kind of renovation and getting it all nice and pretty. We're able to do that and able also to provide the technical assistance for business owners. So for a lot of our folks, we know we have businesses, but we may need a little bit of help to get it either legitimized or ready to scale up. And so a lot of the programming that we do is to get people to that point, either by providing the technical assistance on how to make your catering business, take it from out your kitchen to an actual commercial kitchen, making sure that people have the actual access to capital to make that happen through either forgivable or low interest rate loans that we work with you through, and then get you into these spaces where we know you're going to get traffic. For businesses, and particularly for small businesses, you see when you're just starting, there's only so much you can afford. But if you're able to be on that busy, Penn Avenue, Center Avenue, if you're able to be down there, you're going to get foot traffic, you're going to get people, you're going to get eyes on what you do. And so trying to merge the assets that we have between land, between capital, between technical assistance to make a program, again, that centers Black folks, that centers our communities that have been left behind to invest and develop with us in mind and us at the forefront.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Thank you for that answer. That really got me going. My mind now is going in 2 different directions with you today, Lindsay. But that because like this conversation is so rich, your ideas and everything you're putting forth is just so inspiring, right? So I want to hang this on the clothesline for a second. Like I want to ask you about your legislative priorities, right? But we're in this part of the conversation about racial inequality, social economic inequalities, and all this stuff. So I want to know, like, with everything that's been going on, around those issues, racial inequality, economic inequality, right? Gender inequalities, right? There's been a lot of conversation around this just over the last even couple years, right? So what are some of the steps that you're hoping that, being a part of the legislator will take you and put you in a position where you can actually address these in real time, like really put your hands on it? What are you expecting there?
As someone who comes from the legislative space, and I've had the experience and opportunity really to not just research and draft legislation, craft it, pass it, and implement it. I really want to be someone a part of our delegation that's able to get granular, talking about what works, what doesn't, being very specific in our policy making. There are so many things, particularly in our toolbox that we have at the state level that are a little nerdier, a little wonkier, but they have robust impact. A bill that I worked on that was recently passed, it's called MICTL. It basically allows for land banks, which are entities, and we have one here in Pittsburgh, but it's an entity essentially that is able to buy land very cheap and get it back into community hands. And so we have a land bank here, but it's taken a lot of time to rev up. A lot of it is because we didn't have the capital to do so, the capital to not just staff it, but the capital to purchase land and purchase houses that we could rehab and then turn back into community hands to help diminish and alleviate our housing crisis here in Allegheny County. But this particular bill that I helped put together allows for our land banks to buy at share of sale, which essentially is, when houses are unfortunately foreclosed upon, we're able to buy them really quickly at these share of sales and then get them back to community hands. How it works now is, the land bank would be able to purchase or have the land transferred from the city. And the city properties that we have are a little worse for wear. But when we're talking about being speedy, when we're talking about being quick and being efficient and getting land back to people who we know not just need it, but we know is the type of interventions that help build generational wealth, that help revitalize communities and let communities lead the way. These are the type of wonky, kind of nerdy, nitty gritty things that I love doing, and that we have so much more to do. And so when you're talking about what does that actually mean? What does fighting for this stuff look like? I've got a whole iPhone notes full of different things that we're seeing that, if this little tweak happened here, if that little tweak happened here, we could really open the valves to get good, to make right on the promises that legislators make to community members. And so I hope I'm not jumping ahead too much, but housing for me is deeply personal. When you're talking about, issues that I, as a legislator, would want to make sure to champion. We have a housing crisis here in Allegheny County, and there's no other way to kind of slice it. Whether you're talking about deeply affordable, whether you're talking about workforce housing for folks who are maybe working 1-2 jobs and still can't afford housing. And when you're talking even about homeowners, especially our aging adults who want to stay in their homes, who've invested in these spaces and now are really worried about their ability to maintain their property so that they could, pass peacefully in his home or pass it to the next, to the next generation across the gambit, whether you're a homeowner, whether you're a renter, whether you're somewhere in between. We are seeing that housing is a huge issue for every single one of us. And so having those tools, from the renters, like rental assistance, making sure that folks who, maybe out of work for a little bit have access to money to keep them in their homes, whether you're talking about home repairs that allow for, say, again, that aging adult to put in improvements to their stairs so that they can get in and out, up and down their homes. Even in our neighborhood in the 21st district, a neighbor of mine just moved. Shirley and Bob, they lived in that house. They bought it in 1960 something for
Wow.
for pennies. But Shirley, the wife is they just sold the house because they weren't able to come up with the money to put a chair on the stairs. And so for the past several years, she's just been living on the first floor of the house, can't go upstairs at all because she physically can't do it, nor do they have the capital to put that chair in. And so you're seeing across the district, again, not just the housing crisis that we know we have in spaces like Lawrenceville and the Strip District, which I hope to represent, where it's just the rent is just too damn high. You even have for homeowners that they don't have the ability to stay in these spaces, and so they moved out the district. They sold the house, and are now in an assisted living facility, but didn't want to go. And so you see that story replicated over and over again. And we can't build a county for all. We can't have the most livable city if we're not addressing these issues. And then more than anything, we know, rightly or wrongly, that one of the fastest ways to generate and create generational wealth is having assets. And for most people, a business is inattainable, but having a home is usually the route that people go. But if that is the only tool that we have to build generational wealth for folks who do not come from money, and it's inaccessible, and people aren't able to stay in their homes, and they're not even able to reap the benefits by passing it along or using it as leverage for college for their young people or starting a business, what have you, we're doing it wrong. And so, as you can tell, I am very passionate about housing. It's something that
Yeah, I can see. I see you're passionate about it. I love it.
I think about it deeply. I listen to, housing podcasts and always talking to housing advocates and, housing advocates and have housing activists in this space, because our system is broken from top to bottom, from renter to homeowner. And we need to have some serious and intentional changes to make sure that this critical piece of having a robust life is taken care of.
Yeah, you're right about that, and about housing specifically. That's one of the issues. There's many issues out here, but that's one of the issues that really is an intersection for multiple issues, like racial inequality links to housing, gender inequality links to housing, economic inequality links to housing, right? And you made a big point. It's like most people aren't going to start a business, right, to build something that's going to generate, generational wealth over time, but to have that piece of equity in a home that you own, right? That's like their first piece of really real wealth that they can pass down to their families. So, um, how about you talk about how that is an intersection for those three types of inequalities, and then lay it out in terms of your legislative priorities. Like, what are you going to do as far as your plan, right? To take up the next session if you're elected. How are you going to what are you going to do step by step to address those issues?
Yeah. I'll try and be brief because again, I can get really animated about this. So like, when it comes to housing in particular, I see that there are a lot of opportunities to make it easier for land banks and community land trusts. The Commonwealth doesn't have a lot of programs for rehab. And so rehab dollars. So we have a lot of, not a lot, we have funding. There are existing streams of funding to do new construction, and that even, I mean, we're not going to build our way out of our housing crisis. I think the other thing too is reframing Pittsburgh's assets. When you look across cities like ours that have the same kind of Rust Belt legacy, so a Detroit, Cincinnati, a Cleveland, they look at their housing stock and their vacant housing stock as an asset. For us, we see it as a detriment. Granted, we have right now at the city of Pittsburgh probably between 15 to 18,000 vacant parcels. And these are just pieces of land. Some of them have a piece of a house on it. Some of them have a full house on it. Some of it are just all, like green side, but they're almost 18,000 parcels that the city owns. And then when you're talking about you have X amount of people that are under house or experiencing homelessness or are renting or don't have the opportunity to own, and you've got this big old, chunk of land here. We need to be thinking about this like as an asset. Right now, we think about it as, oh no, we've got to cut the grass on these, or like, how do we diminish blight? And that's important. But more than anything, we need to be thinking about getting it back into people's hands. And so I think a lot. I'm very passionate about thinking about land as an asset here in Southwestern PA and making it easier from the legislative perspective to get city owned parcels, municipal owned parcels back into community hands and back on the tax rolls. The other pieces of my platform that I am very excited to bring to Harrisburg if elected also include a strong, equitable local economy, as we've talked about. How do we make it easier for businesses, small businesses, and for entrepreneurs to exist and thrive here? What are we doing to better incentivize businesses to come here, but not by selling the cow and the milk, but making sure that we're bringing in businesses that want to be good partners, that are paying family sustaining wages, that have career mobility, that are thinking about childcare as a part of their packages, about being, coming here and being a part of our region. For far too long, I feel like from our economic development strategy in Pittsburgh has been, we're just happy you're here. Just come on, we're happy you're here. Just there's space, there's room. We got, some tech stuff happening. Just come on down, and we need to think of ourselves as an asset. We have these beautiful communities. We have some of the most exciting tech and AI happening here. We have all these advanced manufacturing opportunities and on and on and on and on. We need to be thinking about ourselves as an asset. And if you want to come join our community, what are you going to do to benefit us? What are you going to do to pour into us? At the URA, we've been more aggressive, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, excuse me, we've been more aggressive about community benefits agreements. It's not just come on down, we've got space, we'll roll out the red carpet. It's, well, what are you doing for us? What are the workforce incentives? Are you making sure you're hiring our folks in this community and you're hiring at family sustaining wages? You're not giving them $7.25 and giving them a pat on the head and calling it a day. We need to be more aggressive about who we invite to be a part of our ecosystems and how they're going to operate as good actors here. And then lastly, I could go on, but more than anything, this race has the ability to be the deciding factor so that we can regain the Democratic majority. So there are 101 Republicans right now to 101 Democrats in the House of Representatives in Pennsylvania. And it's down to us on September 19th to not just send a progressive Democrat, to Harrisburg for the 21st district, but all the advances that the House has made in the past years having a majority could go away. We're talking about OSHA protections for public workers. We're talking about raising the minimum wage. We're talking about LGBTQIA rights being solidified in code. All the things that I feel are common sense, common sense legislation. That has the ability to go away if we don't retain the majority. And so making sure that, and we just don't have a Democrat just to add to the crew to be 102, but someone who's going to really fight for those progressive values that we know Pittsburgh and the Western PA region wants.
Yeah, I mean, don't I love the passion. I think the people appreciate the passion because, just a lot of politicians out here that don't even give us that much information. So thank you for that. That was amazing. But it leads me to a broader question. I mean, now that you're talking about, changing the guard, right? You're talking about the potential that this district vote can actually swing the power structure in the house in Harrisburg, right? In that particular part of the capital government. Sorry, I was had so many things going
No.
through my head right there. I was like, oh my goodness, because you said so much. I'm like, wow. So it makes me think about leadership, right? It makes me think about how the leadership dynamic is changing in the state capitol, right? You have a lot of black and brown people being elected into office, and then mostly women, right? So how do you see your role, in this whole movement of changing leadership, right, across southwestern Pennsylvania? And then furthermore, how do you see your role, as a female leader, right, as a black woman leader, and that could be elected to this very important position?
Yeah. I I have always said, no matter what role I'm in, you stand on the shoulders of the folks who came before you. And while excited by the opportunity of being the first Black person to hold this seat, and also being, I think, Summer said the other day, the third Black woman to represent Western PA after herself, and Representative Mays, I recognize that none of this happens without folks behind you pushing, 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 pushing to get there. And so I'm always deeply honored by this opportunity to serve in this way, because I know so many before me and currently, have done the work, have laid the foundation for this to happen. And so I don't forget that ever. How I see myself being a Black woman leader in this space. I've always been a collaborator. I've always been an accomplice. I want to be someone and a legislator who's known for doing the work. People ask me what I'm excited about most if elected to serve, and it's like, I can't wait to get into them chambers and start writing some legislation. When I tell you that is the part more than anything that I'm excited about, is because we know that there's power in those seats. We know that, without folks who are able to make sure that at the very granular level that we're, writing legislation, crafting legislation, and more important, implementing policies and programs that affect people, then it's all for naught. It doesn't matter where you sit. I've always loved government, and I've always loved, in particular, local government, because you feel your work in front of you. I've worked at the federal level, and while very exciting, at the end of the day, sometimes I felt like, well, what did I do today? It's a long game, but like what did I do? And being a part of this community, being a part of hopefully a part of a legislative class here that has been dogged about making sure that we have tangible change for people is so exciting. We've moved past the political space and the political world where you can kind of show up at a community event, wave a hand, say that you've got hot lunches for folks, and that's it. Like, people expect more because they deserve more. And we've seen that, especially this most recent class of legislators and policymakers and politicians are doing that. And so I'm so excited by the opportunity to be able to, again, stand with folks, to be a collaborator, to be an accomplice, and to really get good work done.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you're right about, Summer being elected first black female congresswoman, and that broke the mold. It really did. It broke the mold, and I felt like personally it started a chain reaction, where the people looked at it like, well, we're breaking this history making, but there's more accessibility. You see what I mean? There's more accessibility because I'm noticing that with a lot of you all winning these seats, that there's more accessibility because you do have that passion for the community. You do come from a background of, like we talked about, building coalition and caring about the issues that matter, like housing and socioeconomical disparities and racial disparities. And so with that being said, when it comes to campaigning, right? What have you learned while you were campaigning, right? And what have you gathered from the people, right? And furthermore, how would you like the people to engage you, right? Are there specific ways that people can engage you, or did you prefer they would engage you to try to get some more of these results and be more active in the civil process?
Yeah. My favorite part. So while I've worked for elected officials, at my first time candidate, I've never run for anything before. I've obviously door knocked for all the folks, but I've never been in the campaign space. And so I'm learning so much. First and foremost, yard signs. People love yard signs. That's my first big takeaway. But more than that, and more seriously, nothing beats a one-on-one conversation. I door knock every single day. If I'm at meetings, I got my cute shoes on, but in my bag and my little selfie, I've got my tennis shoes. And so I'm always door knocking. I always have a list on me, if I'm going in between meetings or what have you, like, let me just stop on a few doors and just, introduce myself. I think for far too long, people have felt like politicians, in particular, the Democratic Party, just assumes that you have their support because you're a Democrat, they're a Democrat, and we just vote for Democrats. More than anything, I've told people, and I mean this sincerely, is that I want to earn your vote. Sure, you may be a registered Democrat and you've always voted Democrat, but I want to earn your vote. I want to make sure that you personally, as a voter, have the confidence in our campaign, in our vision. You have the confidence that we can deliver what you're looking for. And so starting even from that basic premise, I feel like has been really well received, where people on the doors are like, oh yeah, I'm a Democrat, I'll vote for you. It's like, thank you. But what do you care about? What's important to you? Like, I'm like, let's have this conversation. So I've been so my heart has been so warmed by folks being very moved by that, because I don't know how many times people get, because campaigns are so quick, and you gotta do this and that and that. And yes, and especially in this special election that's been incredibly rapid. Sure, time is of the essence, but nothing beats the ability to have that one-on-one conversation with people, that intimate conversation with neighbors, and not just the neighbors that presumably speak for everyone. And so it's not that that's been the most surprising part, but that's been the part that I've valued the most about this, is that, people people want to be heard. And like being able to sit down on someone's stoop, and sit there and talk about XYZ has made me even more invigorated and more passionate about this opportunity as well.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, how can people find out more about your campaign? And I know you kind of shared some of your thoughts of wanting to earn their votes and anything, but is there anything further that you would add to that as well?
So I'm a talker, so I can, give me a microphone, I'll go, but I'll be brief. I've never been a stranger to hard work, and I've said this to people over and over again. I've had to work hard for every single thing that I've gotten in this world and in this life. And I, as a hopeful elected official, vow to work hard every single day on behalf of constituents and behalf of the Commonwealth. I don't take any of this for granted. I don't. I wake up every single day overwhelmed in the best way possible that this opportunity is presented itself, and that I have the opportunity to serve in this way. And really, the important word there is serve. I feel like this job is you are a public servant. You are there to advocate, to serve our communities. And again, I don't take that lightly, and want to work hard on behalf of every single person, not just in the 21st, but in our shared communities in Pittsburgh and in the Commonwealth. You can find more about myself and our campaign and what we're building on Lindsay Powell for FORPA.com, Lindsay Powell for PA on Facebook as well, and Instagram. We like to keep it one handle, so you can find us all there, and that's Lindsay LINDSAY, just to further confuse people between the two Lindsays and everything else.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely, when there's people with the same name, you got to be like, look, I'm this one.
And it's been interesting. I was with Senator Williams the other day, and I'm sure I'll say this like several times. People are going to be sick of me saying this, but at one point, between the House and the Senate, there were more men named Dan than there were women. Full stop.
Wow.
Full stop. More men named Dan than there were women. And now we have a delegation, with several people of color, with several women, with several Black women, and two Lindsays. So,
It's like, yeah, go figure. It only gets better, right?
right.
Well, this interview is amazing. I mean, guys, this interview is amazing, right? So hopefully you're getting to know Lindsay and you're listening to her talking points and everything. And Lindsay, we have a running tradition on the Sunday night sit down, right? Where we ask the miracle question, right? So this question was brought up by Miracle, of course, and we ask it at the end of every Sunday night sit down. Little chance for you to get, a little personal, let people know you on the personal side. And the question is, what brings you joy?
Hmm. So many things bring me joy. And I tell, my friends, my community, my team always like find your pockets of peace too. Um, what brings me joy? I really love to cook. It's something that like and like, during the week, sometimes you just gotta make a meal for sustenance. You gotta throw together what's in the fridge or in the shelf or whatever. But like when I really get down to like having some time to make like a 2-hour meal, and like share it with friends, that honestly brings me joy. So I'm always trying to bring people over, for dinner or for snacks or whatever. Just, cooking brings me so much joy because it's a way for me, I feel like, one, to be creative. My sibling is the creative one. They, oh my God, I'm so jealous. They do everything. They do art, they play music, they sing, everything they do. Like growing up, my mom tried to get us into instruments, and I would be struggling for months, and they just pick it up like beep, 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 and I'm like, what? Like, so they're beautifully creative, and I've always been jealous that I don't have any creative bones in my body, but like that is the one way where I feel creative, and I feel that I can give something back to people who I feel like have given me. So one day I'll have to have you over for dinner, and
Yeah, that'll be great.
yeah, absolutely. But cooking, hosting, brings me a lot of joy.
That's amazing. See, it's like we was built with a heart for the people. You know what I'm saying? You
Just
know
because
what
I
I'm
like to
saying?
eat is really what it is. So
I know that's right. Listen, guys, this was amazing. Lindsay, thank you so much for sitting down with us on a Sunday.
thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, this was absolutely, absolutely amazing. And, we're going to have everybody look her up online, go to her website, all those different things. Reach out to her so that, you can get your questions answered as she's running her campaign. In the meanwhile, we want to appreciate you for watching this week's edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down. We have a lot going on, but the big thing is September 19th is the special election here for District 21. All right. So you want to get out there. Remember, if you haven't submitted your mail-in ballot, you got to do that. You got to submit it by Tuesday. This says Tuesday between 7 and 8 p.m., 7 a.m., 8 p.m., right? So you want to make sure you get there, submit that mail-in ballot. We got to have that in so your vote can count. You can also go to vote.pa.gov to find your polling place, right? You know how it is. You wake up and you're like, oh my goodness, where do I go to vote, right? Check it out. Go to votepa.gov to find your polling place near you so you know exactly where to go. Don't wait till Tuesday morning. All right, let's do this, tonight or Monday, sometime tomorrow, so that you know exactly where to go to vote. In addition, if you are a citizen and a resident of Pennsylvania, you also have until October 23rd to register to vote, right? So you can update your voter registration. You can vote in the general election on the 7th of November. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure your registration is up to date so that you can also vote in the general election on November 7th. And this general election, everybody votes, right? Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, you can vote in this general election. So that's a huge reminder to all voters everywhere across the Commonwealth. All right. So, guys, check us out here. You're watching us on One Hood Power right here on YouTube. Remember, you can find us at One Hood Media. Find us on all of our pages. We got a lot coming up this election season and this political season. So you want to be staying tuned right here on the channel. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, right? Give us a shout there. And until then, it's me, John Horn, signing off. Had a great talk today, and we'll see you next time on the Sunday Night Sit Down.